Thank you everyone for joining first Guwahati MuleSoft Meetup. This is the first meetup we are starting today, and this is the first group. So thank you everyone who is attending today. So I'm the host for this meetup. Nikhil, can you go to second floor? Yeah. So I'm the host for this meetup. So I'm working as an associate solution architect at Episado. I have an overall of 6+ years of experience and 4+ years in MuleSoft. I'm certified MuleSoft developer and architect, MuleSoft mentor, and also leader for Guwahati and Lucknow meetup. I also write blogs and have a YouTube channel where I post all the technical videos. Over to you, Nikhil.
Yeah. Hi guys, thank you for joining the meetup. Speaking about myself, I am working as a lead engineer in Episado, and I'm into MuleSoft domain since last 2 years. I'm a platform architect as well as a certified developer. So I've just now become the Kolhapur meetup leader. So trying to share my knowledge as much as possible, whatever I have. Over to you guys. Yeah, that's it.
Thanks, Nikhil. So let me read out the safe harbor statement. So both the speaker and the host are organizing this meetup in individual capacity only. We are not representing our companies here. This presentation is strictly for learning purpose only. Organizer or the presenter do not hold any responsibility that same solution will work for your business requirement. This presentation is not meant for any promotional activities. Next slide. So some housekeeping. So this is quite very important. So I will upload the recording in within 24 hours, and I will share it over LinkedIn and on the meetup page, like the Guwahati meetup page. To make it more interactive, like you can put your questions over the chat. Feel free to put whatever question you want. And at last, when the meetup is end, you will get a mail with the feedback form. So please do write your feedback. That is very important for us. You can write your suggestion, like what would be the next topic you want us to present, and how was today's presentation. So that is very important for us. Please do have your feedback.
Yeah, guys, please give your feedback.
Yeah.
Okay, so
So over
let's
to you,
start.
Nikhil.
Yeah. Okay. Let's start with the topic today, error handling. So whenever we do some development, we are only focusing on the happy path scenarios and like we're happy when it's running. But the most important part is what do we do when such errors or there is some exception handle in our flows? What happens in MuleSoft, how we handle such type of errors, or what are the different types of errors that we are going to see today. So these will be the contents that I will be showing, but we'll focus more on the demo part than on the slide part. Okay, so these are the error what we will see today: error types, error components, try-catch flow, error handling in different types of flows like private or subflow. We can also create custom errors, so using raise custom errors, error handling in parallel for each, error handling in batch processing scatter gather, multi-processing activities, basically error handling in data view. So these are the contents. MuleSoft errors, the hierarchy, what the error of MuleSoft follows. So there are two types of error: system and messaging error. So whenever an error is thrown out, a Mule error object is created. So we have to understand this Mule error object first. So let's go to the demo. Okay. So this is my simple flow. I'll just demo the flow first. This is my listener, a basic listener. I'm taking an input. What I'm taking here, I'm taking a simple object in the input. You can see employee ID, employee name, single record. I'm just printing success started. This is my REST API, just a mock API, you can say, which I'm calling. Okay. This is my endpoint. And this is my payload, which will give me the finished flow. I don't have any error handling now. First of all, we'll check how the success scenario works. Okay. We deploy it. Let me put into debug. So let's check. Let us see the first success scenario. Then when the error occurs, then what are the basic type of errors that occur and how we handle this until it's deployed. Let's see the hierarchy of the errors. So whenever an error object is created, this is the description. It has various key value pairs. You can say error description. What does error description tell us? It tells us the description of the problem. If you want the more detailed description of an error object, can give error dot description is there. Error type, basically different error types that we have here. You can see here, these are the error types we'll see in the next slide. So different error types like HTTP errors, database error. If you're using file, then there will be file handling errors. Error cause, error message, child errors. These are some basic or that we use when we write to description an error. If you want to give an error description, error type, error status. So these are the main things that we need to keep in mind about an error object. So what is the hierarchy? What it follows? So errors are basically divided into two parts like any and critical. Any is the main object. You can say it's the parent part. And under the any, you can see different types of errors. We can have transformation error, routing errors, connectivity, expression errors, DW expression errors, or security errors. And the critical are fatal and overload. So in terms of any, we can also have the component level errors that come. And then it's deployed. Let's check. Okay, it's deployed. This is a success scenario, and this is what I'm getting. Success finish flow. So now if I change the path, here, so this will be throwing us an error, but the path should be invalid. Let's check and deeper. Okay, this throws an error. So when an error is thrown, now you can see an error object is created here. So what it has: error description, error detail description, error type, errors, cause, everything. It in a nested structure. So this is my description. This is the error object created, what we have seen. These are the different fields of the error object. And now it won't go to the success flow and will just throw out an error. What is the response we have? We have this 404 not found. So how we, because this doesn't mean, this is not giving me any meaningful message if you want to throw out from your API. So how can we change this? How can I give a meaningful message? Or how can I basically handle my error? So let's suppose, so there are two components basically that we have here: on error propagate, on error continue. On error continue, in the scenarios, if you want to just go ahead, even if there is an error, it will give you 200. Okay. On error propagate, it will give you 500 and it will come out of the flow. So we'll go with the on error propagate part. And I want to set my own error message here. So what I can do here is I can set a good error message looking something like this. Let us set this up. Basically, we are trying to give a meaningful error message, or trying to handle the error whenever it is occurred. So this is what I'm giving timestamp. Timestamp is basically when the error occurred, and the error type, as we saw, the error object. First, let us trace the error object. That will be more essential. We're trying to trace the error object payload. So one more thing that we need to change here. So when we see the listener, by default, what it has, by default, you can see the response. When it is 200, it gives payload, status quo 200 and everything. When there is an error, so when there is an error, we need to change this part, because we are just giving error dot description here, which is not meaningful for a new guy to understand, or in terms of complexity also it is not good. So what I will do is I will change it. I'll put a meaningful message. Application JSON. What I'm doing, I'm giving the message as a payload. What I have in my payload, here is my payload. What I'm setting, I'm just giving you the error object. So let's check now. Basically, we'll check how the error object looks like. Error is thrown out. This is my error description. Now it will go to my error handler flow that I have in place that we didn't have previously. So now this will set me up the payload with the error message. Okay, now you can see how an error object looks like. Let me get it to Notepad. Let's check it. Now you can see how an error object basically looks like. It has error type, child errors, error message, different sections. You have attributes. Under that, you also have the status code 404. If you see here, we also need to adjust that because it every time gives 500 server error, which is not right. This is the cause. This is how an error object basically looks like. You can use message, description, detailed description. So you can get out the fields, whatever you need to log out or whatever you need to show out from your error response. Okay, so now we have seen how an error object looks like. Let me put some useful. So we'll just put some of the main that is essential: timestamp, error type, and error cause and description. Error type, error type namespace. Error cause message I'm printing, and I'm giving the error description. So this is just putting your error object into a meaningful or into a slightly easier way for another ones to understand, like what is the error, what are the things that you want to show out from your API whenever an error is created. Also, we have to change the status code here, which is always showing 500. We already have changed the response body. We need to change the status code. So how do you apply status code? For the status code, you have to go into your error message, under that attributes and status code. As you can see here, status code, it's under attributes, under error message. Okay, so let me put this in status code bar. So I get the right status code, and as I'm getting 500 now, it should not be 500, which will give me out what is the relevant status code here. It's 404. Okay, let's check this. Error is thrown out. The message. So my error message. So you see the status code is now the relevant status code. It's not a 500. 500 is by default by listener. So you can see my error message is quite now simple and it looks good, like timestamp. You can trace whatever is the time. Error type is HTTP. Error cause, error description. Any questions until now before I move to the next slide?
I don't see any question. Can you also check the page once, because yeah, we have one question from error object. Can we get which resource which is throwing the error? This is from Aditya. Like from error object, can we get which resource which is throwing the error?
Yeah, in the message also you can see on resource. This is my resource which is throwing the error. This is my basically API endpoint which is throwing an error.
Hope that answer you, Aditya. Okay, we can move forward, Nikhil.
So this is the error distribution part that we had seen, different types of errors. Now you'll see error handlers: on error continue, on error propagate, and raise error. On error continue, basically we saw it always gives up 200. So let's see how it works. On error continue versus on error propagate. The main part of error handling in MuleSoft is this, right? Okay, so event processor, if I have an on error propagate. Event processor, this is my HTTP listener. It's it, HTTP and processes, like if I have database HTTP request something, this is throwing an error, my response goes back to the HTTP listener. As we have seen there, response always goes back to HTTP listener, and the responses we have printed are payload and the status code. So this happens in terms of on error propagate. It gives 500. You can see this red line, it shows it is an error. Sorry, it gives 500 back to the listener. And in terms of on error continue, event processor throws it, and now my block is inside on error continue. even if there is an error, I want to continue with my processing. There might be various scenarios, like you're trying to do different things. Suppose you're trying to insert 100 records, even one of your records fails. You don't want your whole flow to fail. That's why in that scenario we can use on error continue, because we don't want the rest of the 99 records also to fail. If one records fail, then 99 records will fail. This happens in case of on error propagate. So to improve that, we can use on error continue. Even if there is one error or one record has failed insertion into a database, the flow will definitely continue. So what happens in terms of on error continue? This is my event processes. If it throws an error, it throws as a 200 okay. So what comes back to my listener as a response is again 200 okay. So two things to remember, 2 points to highlight, I will say. On error propagate throws 500 and on error continue throws 200 okay. Okay.
Nikhil, sorry to interrupt. I just also want to add some point. Like
Yeah.
in Mule, so in Mule 4, by default, Mule 4 accept on error propagate. But if any one of you have used MMA, Mule Migration Assistant, and migrated Mule 3 to Mule 4, you will find the error handling what is there in Mule 3. When it converts to Mule 4, it get converted as on error continuous. So this is something you can remember. Okay, so by default Mule 4 follows on error propagate, but if you migrate from Mule 3 to Mule 4 using MMA, it changes to on errors continuous. Yeah, Nikhil, go on.
Yeah, that's a good point to add, Abhishek. Okay. So let's do a demo for what is global error handler. I will show it to the demo basically. So I handle my error onto a flow level basically. So what happens if you have multiple flows, it's not a right way to handle it on a flow level. Basically, this is the flow level that we are handling. So what MuleSoft gives us an approach is to handle all the errors on a global level. Just to create a global error handling, which will be available for all of your project, or also you can create one API, or you can create one different project which is generally used for only error handling, and then you can also add the dependencies in your main project. That is also an approach. If you want to keep one file in your project itself, which is called a global level error handler. So I will show you what is the component. You see this is called as global level error. Let me again show you. This is called as a global level error handler. In this global level error handler, you can place multiple error types. Suppose if I have on error propagate and I'm saying this only will handle HTTP not found. Now this comes a new scenario. When you use on error propagate, there are two things that you can give, which you can give. It automatically gives you the suggestion depending upon the connectors, if whatever you have. And one thing is like you can write the condition, like when namespace equals to HTTP. That we'll see in another scenarios how you can use this when condition also. So in global level error handler, you can add multiple error scopes or multiple error types. Any as we saw, this is the parent level error type. If I am not matching, if doesn't match HTTP not found or any other error types, then by default it will go into the any error type. Okay, so this is the global level error handler. And to implement this global level error handler, we'll have to add one thing and point it to that. Yeah. You see this configuration connector. I'm giving a global level error handler. Okay. I'm saving it. So whenever there is an error, as my mule flow basically, it doesn't have a flow level error handler, then it will go back to my global level error handler. And if I don't have a global level error handler, then it will handle by MuleSoft default error handler. So if I need to give you what is the preference. So if you have a flow level error handler, it will always have a greater. Then it comes global level error handler. Then you go to default error handler. So this is the sequence. If you have a default in place, handling have a global level error handler in place. I don't have a global level error handler. So global level handler is basically if you want to handle, if you can determine what are the types of errors that can occur, you can just create simply one file instead of handling one by one error at the flow level. So that is good to handle by using a global level. So let's check this, how it propagates. Throws out an error, creates an error message. Now you can see, now it has come to my global level error handler. What is the error type? Error type here you see in the error object, HTTP not found. Here HTTP not found, so it goes into the matching one. Matching one gets the precedence. If there I won't have this condition at all, which is HTTP not found, then it will by default go to any, but I have it just found a matching one. Now it goes here, and in the error message I have my message, comes out, goes back to the listener. You see, this is my message, this is my status code. This is how global level error handler works. So let's see this also. Suppose if I don't have HTTP not found, let's command this. I just have any. It's not my HTTP not found. I don't have error handler for this. Now it should go into any, because any is always the parent level error handler. Okay. Check. This is deployed. Okay. Comes here. Goes here. Error is created. Error object is created. Different things. Error type is HTTP not found. Goes it, didn't have it, so any is by default a parent error handler, so it always go into any, goes into any, and throws the error message as well as the code. So this is when you are using a global level error handler. Any questions on global?
We have one question, Nikhil, from Kishore. Like, is it a good practice to expose description showing API information which it's calling?
Sorry, can you repeat, Abhishek?
Yeah. So, is it a good practice to expose description showing API information which it's calling? So, like the API information we have shown, like which API it is calling when we got the error. So, Kishore is asking, is it a good practice to expose that description?
It's the scenario if you are having, like, if your APIs are not being called externally, if you are just calling internally, if your APIs are just being called internally, then it might be in your logger. You can check, like, whenever there is a process calling from experience API or system API is calling an experience API. So in that case, this logging benefit helps. But if your our APIs are being called externally or by the end clients, then it's not a good practice. Like, you cannot expose this. Then you have to create your own description. You can give a string description like failed, and you can keep the cause also, you can keep it on yourself. If it is internally, the APIs are used internally, then it's a good practice. But if it's used externally, then you can't allow it. Hope that answers.
Yeah. Thanks, Nikhil.
Let's move to the what we have seen here. The on error propagate, we basically had HTTP not found, and this is my any. So I had created a global configuration. Okay, let's now move to a custom error handling. What is custom level error handling? Suppose there is a scenario where, let me show you the scenario itself. So what I have for custom level error handling. Suppose I'm taking employee ID. I'm taking employee ID and employee name, and I want to do a check where employee name should not be empty. So in this scenario, it's not that like MuleSoft won't throw any error, because it's just a validation thing. So you can create your own validation. This is where raise error comes into picture, because you're creating your custom validations. So from user, when you're taking your input, you want to give the user like a message like employee name cannot be empty. So in this case, what we are doing, let's see. This is my input payload, whatever object, saving it, I'm just printing success, start of the flow. So in this choice, what I'm doing here. So choice out, I'm taking the input payload and checking is empty is a function which is used to check if it is empty or not. Checking if the employee name is empty. If it's empty, then I'm stating a status code. Status code will be 400, bad request, in the sense like this request is bad, like employee name cannot be empty. I'm setting the status code to 500 and I'm raising an error like employee invalid record. So this is the same hierarchy. If you see here, HTTP not found, give an example. So this is like HTTP, this is like namespace and identifier. So this is the namespace colon, this is the identifier. This is the sequence you have to follow. You go back to the slide. You see the sequence we need to follow: namespace and then payload.employee we are checking, and it's also, suppose if I show you here, HTTP colon internal server error, namespace colon identifier. This is the sequence we need to follow. So I'm creating my own error with employee invalid record. I'm just setting a description like invalid data, employee name cannot be empty. And if there is a right employee, then this will be my just a payload, it's not empty, and it will go successfully outside and it will give me out successfully it has finished the flow. So let's debug and check. Basically, when there are scenarios like you want to create your own errors or you want to raise errors, suppose there is a scenario like someone is trying to post a record but that record doesn't exist, so you will create a record, but someone is trying to put a record that doesn't exist. So in this scenario, first you will have to raise the error that record does not exist. So in that case also you can use raise errors that the record does not exist and you cannot update it. And let's get to this and check. Okay. Custom level error handler. Like my success started flow, failure is set. I see my variable, what is my input, employee ID, and my employee name is empty. Okay, goes into my first. It matched because my input payload employee name was empty. HTTP status has been set. If you see the variable here, 400. Okay, raise error. So employee name was empty, and if you see this here, so it has created my custom error, emp colon invalid record, basically identifier and namespace. So this is my error description. Okay, error has been thrown out, comes out because now I have a global level error handler in place. If I didn't add global level error handler, we will see also that scenario. Now I have global level error handler, so it matches here, comes out, and you can see the description. If you see now, invalid data, employee name cannot be empty. Invalid data, employee name cannot be empty. And if you see 400 bad request. So this is how you can use raise errors if you want to create your own custom errors. Now we'll check one thing. If I don't have a global level error handler in place, so let's just delete the global level error handler. We don't need it now. Okay, we deployed. Function success, checking the condition, will create an error, comes out. If you see here, success started flow, it didn't come here. This is what, because I didn't had an error continue here on the flow, or I didn't had anything on my flow level error handler. As soon as there was an error reached, it came out, it didn't reach here. So it just printed this success started flow. So this is how you will have custom. Let's check the successful scenario also for you guys. If I give the employee name MuleSoft, success comes out, and now this will go out because there was no error thrown. So it returned 200. Okay, now it goes back. Now you see success finished flow. So in this scenario, if you want to handle errors at a flow level, basically what we will need to do, we'll create an on error continue. You can use on error propagate if you want to continue even after the error is there. Suppose this error is blocking, right? If you want to post the data to a database, this is definitely a blocking error, you can't post it. So you can just come out and put on error propagate and just say the employee ID cannot be empty, as we did in the global level. And suppose if you want to move ahead with your components, then you can use on error continue on that flow level itself and go ahead with your next components in the flow. This is the option that we can leverage using on error continue and on error propagate. So this is what for custom level error handling. Any questions for this?
Yes, Murli saying rather raise error. Shall we handle validation check or scan at RAML?
Scan at
Okay.
RAML. RAML can
So
also handle errors itself, right? We
no,
can
no,
have at the
Murli,
RAML level.
Murli, field level validation, yeah, that is one part where we can do with respect to any field. But now, suppose if we are calling any AND system and we are getting some output from that, and we want to have a raise error for that. In that case, custom error is useful. Having a like field level validation from RAML, that is a different thing. That is altogether when you are hitting your API and there you want to have some check. But what if you are getting something from end user, you are getting some type of output and there you want to raise an error, then this will be helpful. Hope this answer your question.
Suppose if you validate your response from any
Yeah,
API that you expect.
yeah, basically for response. And for RAML, what we do is for request validation can be done over there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's first go to flow level, I think. Then probably we can go to try block. So first we will go to flow level. Suppose let's see the demo. What are our flow level? Suppose there are two scenarios. Now this is my main flow and this I called as my child flow. So there are two scenarios. You can also have a subflow and you can have a flow with a source. So two things if you can observe here, what is the difference between a subflow and a flow with the source? If you see a flow with the source, it has its own error handling block. It won't depend on the parent flow. I mean, this is my parent flow, which is calling it. So it has its own error handler block. And if you see the subflow, there is no error handler block. So it has to depend on the parent flow itself. It will throw the error back to the parent. But we'll see how it works. Now we'll check a flow with the reference. So what I'm basically doing is taking the input. This is my main flow that has been started. Calling the child flow. Just close it for now. I'm calling a child flow with the source. And then I'm just printing out. And when I go to my child flow, this is my child flow. I'm just doing one validation. This time I'm checking the employee ID. What I'm checking for the employee ID, so employee ID should always be integer. It won't allow any float values or any string values. And success finish flow. So if I give you a scenario, if you are trying to do some things like if you have a main flow and a child flow, suppose if you're trying to insert some data into a database in the main flow and you're trying to insert those same data into a file also in the child flow. So how you will handle the errors on the child flow itself and how you can handle errors on the main flow level itself, this is what we will understand. Okay, so what I've done is on the child flow, I have an on error propagate to handle this scenario. I'm checking any error type. If there's any error, it will throw the error, handle the error yourself, and then it will throw 500 to this. So let's debug and check for flow level. My endpoint here, flow exception handling. Okay, so if you see here, let us check the success scenario first. I'm passing employee ID as 12 and this is my employee name. And fill this down so you guys can see. Input payload success started the flow, goes to the child flow. It is a number. The condition is evaluated to true. Success finish child flow, and then again it comes back to my main flow with 200 OK. So if you see there, what is the status return from child flow is 200 OK. Now if it read this one flow reference receives 200 OK, it goes to the next processors in the flow. Now success finished main flow will be my payload. Let me check for an error. I will pass float value. There's an error in the child flow. Error is generated. Employee ID mismatch. Validation. Invalid number is my error type. So I have error handler at the child level itself. So it will handle the error. Error in child flow comes out. It won't go to the next processors as there was an error. And if you see what is my payload, error in child flow. So this is the first scenario. Let's see this slide on error. Propagate. This is how it works. First step, listener, then goes to my success, then flow reference, then goes to a child flow. Error is generated, goes here back on error, propagate. This is my fourth step. And then go back to my flow reference, and this won't be executed. So this is the execution order. So this is not real scenario. Suppose if there is any error in child flow and you don't want your parent flow to stop. So that is the scenario where we will use this scenario on error continue. So what does happens in this? Comes to my flow reference, goes back here, error is generated, on error continue. On error continue will give me 200 and goes back and it will give me 5 and it goes back to here as 6. So let's see that scenario. So instead of on error propagate, I will have an on error continue here. Put this here. Let me delete this. Suppose if there's any error in the subflow, when I give the example of database and file insertion, if there is any error in file insertion, I don't want my upper or the parent flow of database to stop. In that scenario, I'll be returning on error continue. Let's see. Now this will generate an error because my number is of float. It's not an integer basically. Creates an error, comes here on error continue, throws back 200. Now you see the successive components of the parent flow. It goes back to the successive components. Suppose after data, if I have any other connectors like database, and after that if I want to send out a mail or something and I want my other components to be executed, in that case you have to use a on error continue. You see was finished main flow. We'll see the scenario here always like 4, then it went here, now it went as a 200. Okay, so it went here and then back to my listener. So another condition here we'll check. So it throws on error propagate and this parent flow has on error continue. So what happens in this scenario? Goes here flow reference, calls the child flow, on error propagate, it will throw 500 itself, goes back to the flow reference. But now this my parent level here, if you see my parent level didn't had any error handler. Parent level didn't had any error handler. Now we'll have an error handler for it. The parent level error handler, it goes to my parent level error handler, then it comes back and gives 7. But in this case it won't go to the next transformer because it always goes when there is a 200 okay received. In this case it received 500. So this is the condition we need to remember, like whenever my child flows throws 200 okay on error continue, then only my successive transformers after the flow reference will be executed. If this is throwing 500 and even if I have an on error continue on the main flow, it won't go back to successive transformers. Okay, let's see that scenario. We bring back on error continue. I will have in my parent flow also I will have an error handler on error continue. Let's see if the main objective is see successive components after the flow reference are being executed or not. This is the ideal scenario. You don't want your parent flow components to stop. You want to execute all the components, then you basically need to check this. So just let me copy this. We'll say error in main flow. Okay. Let's check. Back comes here. Goes to my child flow. Error is thrown out. It has an on error propagate, which will basically throw 500. Error is come back. We just need to check the successive components. Comes here on error continue. Difference if you see it is 200, okay, but it has been stopped to error main flow. It didn't go to the success finished flow transformer or the successive components after the flow reference. The condition when you can see is the flow level error handler. So now we'll see another when you call a subflow. Let me change this subflow. As you can, main difference is subflow won't have its own error handler. It will basically depend on the parent flow level itself. I'm calling the subflow now. What I'm doing in the subflow, I'm doing the same thing, checking if it is a number, successfully finished child subflow. And I now have an error handler in this. I have my own error handler in the main flow because subflow won't have error handler. It will inherit from its parent itself. Okay. And here goes to child flow. Error is generated, comes back here, goes to the error handler for the parent flow. Yeah, see here, error in the main flow. The scenario, because as the subflow won't have its own error handler, it will always depend on the parent. It will throw back the error to its parent flow, and then parent flow will have to handle the error. The basic difference. Any questions for this flow level error handling?
One question, Nikhil, from Devendra. He's asking, like, if there is technical error occurred in a flow, and flow has an on error propagate, what will be set in payload?
What will be set in payload? So
Yeah.
it depends if on error propagate you have, right? In on error propagate, you might set your own payload, right? I am setting my own payload. Whatever I am setting, you can set your own payload. You can set the error description, error message. If you don't set anything, it will be by default by the global error handler, whatever it will give, and it will go back to the listener, and it will just print error dot description. Else you will have to change it to payload if you want to print the payload. Basically, it's like you have to set your own payload on the error handling itself. That's why we are using error handling components, basically to give out a proper meaningful messages.
Yeah. So you can customize whatever output you want when you get any particular error. So you can customize that. Thank you.
Now we will see try scope. Okay, I can move ahead, Abhishek. Any more questions?
Yeah, sure, sure. You can move ahead.
We'll take at last if there are any. Okay, suppose if there is try scope. Now one more error handling scenario where you can use a component level error handling. So my hierarchy, what I had shows you previous, now here it's changes. Suppose if I have error handling at the component level itself, what will be the sequence? Component level will always have a greater hierarchy than flow level, then global, then default. If you have a component level error handling, then you don't need a flow level. If you have a flow, then it will go to flow. If you don't have a flow level, then it will go to global and default. So now here the sequence changes. Now let's see for this try catch block. What I'm doing here, let me get you through the flow. This is my listener taking an input object, employee ID, employee name basically. I started my flow is number. So I don't, if you check here, I don't have a flow level error handler here. I'm managing my error at the component level itself. So what you can do, you can just click on this, wrap in, click on try catch block. Once you have that block, then basically you have an error handler here. If you want, I can show you how do we do that. Let me drag one try catch block demo. Yeah, you see this is my try catch block. Error handling, you can add on error continue, on error propagate. You can check what is the condition as I'm taking. If you can give any whatever matters, setting the payload, error try scope, and then it's just going back here. So this is how you can use component level error handling. Basically, suppose if there is a database component or a file level connector, you want to handle errors at the component level itself. You can just put it into a try catch block and set the error type to whatever you want, and you can print the payload here. Suppose some of the record insertion failed, then you can print out the payload there itself on the component level. Success, finish try scope, and this is my finished flow. So let's check for the successful scenario how it works in a try catch block. Set a breakpoint. This is basically try catch block. Let's see this scenario. If I have an on error continue here, like you see, I have an on error continue, how the flow executes. First comes, it will come here, then there is an error generated, goes to the flow level, sorry, component level error handling itself, because there is no flow level. First the priority will be given to component level, because there is an error thrown out. It will go here 200 on error continue, it will show out 200, okay, and the next processor in the try block won't be executed. As we have seen in the flow level, the next processes won't get executed if there is an error in the main flow itself. If the child flow throws 200, then only the next processes will be executed. So this is my on error continue, which gives 200, okay, and now the next processes are executed outside my try catch block, not inside my try catch block. Let's check for this scenario. See, try catch exception handling. Let's check for the successful one. Employee ID, employee name. Success, started flow, is number, right? Success doesn't go into a error handling block as there is no errors. So successful or happy path scenario. If you see success, finished flow. Now let's check how it happens in case of an error. So what I'm checking here, if it should be a number. Let's put it as a float. See, error is generated, error object gets created. Now it will go to the error handler. On error continue, error type matches, because if you see error type is invalid, number is matching here, payload, and then it directly comes out. It won't ever go to the next component in the try catch block. Success, finish flow, because I'm using on error continue here. So this is when if you are want to handle errors at a component level itself for any connector, then we can go basically for the try catch block. Second scenario is for on error propagate. When we use on error propagate in the try catch block itself, how it works. Second goes to my throw, is number throws an error, on error propagate, it gives me 500. So it won't go to the next processors here. If you see cancel, because it has already thrown 500. In case of on error continue, if you see it throws 200. So 200, okay, if it gets 200, okay, then it will go to the next processors. Like everything is okay, but is 500 is thrown out, there is an error, next processors won't get executed at all. So let's check that scenario. We pull on error propagate. Let me track this and leave this. I will set it to any year, not a for particular one. I will set it to any. If there is any error in my component or in my try catch block, it will handle it. The main condition, like there will be different scenarios when you have to use flow level error handler. There will be scenarios when you have to use component level error handler. If you want to handle errors at your connector level itself, then you can use, definitely go for the try catch block. Save it. Let's go down. Error is created, goes to the error handler at the component level itself, try catch block, comes out. So it should be error in try scope itself. It won't go to the next processors, next connectors after the try catch block. Depends on the scenario. If you want to execute other components after the try catch, even if there is an error, then you can use definitely on error continue. If you want to stop the execution, if there is an error, you want to execute other components, then you can use on error propagate. There are two scenarios that we can use. Any questions, Abhishek, we have for try catch, basically component level?
Yeah, we have one question from Vikas. So he's asking like how to handle unsuccessful scope. Are there any pros and cons on thread with maximum retry with parallel threads processing?
Talking about until successful scope.
Yeah. So I will repeat. How to handle until successful scope. Are there any pros and cons on thread with maximum retry with parallel thread processing?
Let's do this. Telling until successful. I'm wrapping this into until successful, and now on the try catch level itself I have an on error component. So in until successful, if you see, I can set my max retries to anything what you want. If there is an error thrown from here, then it will go out basically to on error propagate, and this payload will be executed. So if you speak about pros and cons, if you use until successful, pros is basically there might be some scenarios where if I am using a database connector, suppose there is a connectivity issue when I attempt for the first time. So don't, you can give three attempts. Suppose there is a successful attempt in the second scenario. This is a pro, like sometimes it might happen their connection is down or connection is lost. So in the second attempt it might connect. But what happens here, the cons are basically, if I say like if you're trying too much of a reattempt, it might go into out of state thread, or thread execution might be huge, because if you are trying to connect multiple times, the limit what we said basically is three. Default what we use as a good practice, set the limit to three. In every, if you can say in every 1 minute you can try. Yeah, does that answer, Abhishek? If you want to add anything probably on this.
Because the okay, it will. Because again, he's saying it will throw always retry exhausted. We cannot catch specific type of exception. Yes, because like if we are using until successful, then it's always going to like throw until the error from until successful
Yeah,
or retry
the error
exhausted.
type, if it is any, then it will definitely match, else it will be handled then by default if you don't have anything. The error type won't match. Yeah.
Okay, we can move forward. One from Kishore, but Mustan has already answered. Like if we don't mention any, by default, will it assume any type? Yes, Kishore. Like if don't define any type, error type, then it by default is any.
By default it's any. If I don't write anything here also it's any. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go for multi-threading, single threading. First of all, you will see for each single threaded and parallel for each for multi-threaded. So what is basically for each? For each is, suppose, if I give you an example, I have an array of records. Until now, we have worked on single record. Suppose if I have an array of records, employee ID, employee name, and while inserting into a database or something, I'm using a for each scope. So, really, let me show you the flow. This is my input payload. Success started flow. On the for each component, I'm setting my input payload. So here if you see batch size and root, I'm setting the array as an input. What will happen here? It will take one by one element at a time. Let me go back to the slide. You see here. So this is one by one element at a time. I'm using h2 component logger. So what happens in this scenario? Suppose any one record fails. Any one record fail, my whole for each throws me an error. The next records won't be executed. So how do you handle in these scenarios? How do you handle the errors in this scenario basically? So if you want to avoid one error to discontinue whole of your flow, then the practice that we can do is we can wrap that component which is going to throw an error, or any connector that you have, we can wrap it in a try catch scope and put an on error continue. And basically what I'm doing is logging the error record. Suppose if I have two array of objects, suppose if I have 10 objects here, if any of them is throwing an error, it will be logged out and my other records will be executed. It won't stop my whole flow. Let us check. Another scenario, for each you use a flow level error handler. Then if it comes out of the for each, there you can't execute because only one record fails. It comes out the for each, the other records won't be processed. So the thing how to handle errors inside a for each is you have to wrap that component. You have to use a try catch block. Component level error handling is the best thing that you can do to handle errors in a for each. Okay, let's check for a successful scenario first. Values. Yeah, goes my for each. If you see here, this is my payload. First object it has taken one by one object at a time. First object successful, second object is inside. It will look for the second object. Comes, no errors, comes out, success, finished flow. This happy path scenario that we have tested. Suppose if my second object, I say, which will give me an error. First scenario, success. Second scenario, now it shall throw an error because my employee name is empty. Throws an error, goes to an error, continue, throws 200, okay, and it goes to the next processors. So failure of one record won't affect the processing of other records inside a for each. Suppose let us do one thing. I've seen the successful scenario. If I set up on error propagate here, what I will do is I will create an error in my first record itself now. Check my second record gets executed or not. Okay. This goes first error comes out, employee name cannot be empty, comes out. There was no execution for the second record. There was no attempt to execute because I had used on error propagate. It always throws 500, comes out, no components executed. Also, the other records in the for each didn't execute. So, name cannot be empty. So, one record failure should not affect the processing of other records. Then we need to use on error continue. If you want to stop the flow once one record is throwing an error, then you can use basically on error propagate. And this should be inside a try catch or component level itself for each. Okay. Another new component that has been introduced is a parallel for each. Parallel for each. Let's see the flow for that. Okay. Parallel for each basically a synchronous one. For each takes one by one record at a time. For each parallel for each takes asynchronous. It works asynchronously, basically like a batch job. You can say it takes different threads are assigned to different records. Let's check how this flows. Let's check the flow. What is I'm doing? Setting the payload in the parallel for each. If I'm getting an array of object, I will check for each object there. If any one of them throwing error, it should not propagate or it should not throw errors for the other object. My other objects inside the array should execute successfully. So what I'm doing here is input payload, started flow. I'm using an on error continue block because I don't want the other records to stop the processing here. If you see here, yeah. Let's see how the flow runs. We have seen this for each on error continue. Other records won't get affected, and in the parallel for each, always use on error continue. The execution of other records won't be stopped. Okay, let's check for parallel for each. What I'm giving as an input Let's create an error in the first record. Error in the other record. This will definitely work asynchronous. If you see here, both records are loaded asynchronous. There's no one record at a time. Second record has thrown an error. Because if you see now second record, because we already processed it as a first, but this was taken as a second because this is asynchronous. You cannot predict like each thread will take each record. But if this has thrown an error, comes out, it will log my error record. If you see here which log, this is which has been logged. And as I'm doing on error continue, it will give back 200 and it will go to the next preceding components after the parallel for each. Gives me 200, okay, and it has finished my flow. You go back to the slide to check how it works. Goes here, parallel for each, multiple threadings. Each record will have different thread. It will execute. If you want to go for the successing processors or the next processors after the try each, we use on error continue. And in the same scenario as we saw in the for each, if you use on error propagate, it will throw 500. It won't go to the next processors. It will give out an error itself on the try catch block. Okay. Any questions, Abhishek, we have for each or parallel for each?
From Kishore, can we accumulate all those failed records somewhere?
Yeah, definitely. In case of for each, if you want to do, what I can do is let me initialize an array and do that. And naming is as that of the records, creating a variable. This is my empty array. So what I've done is I've created an empty array where you can accumulate all your failure records. So what I can do whenever there is an error inside this, I can just accumulate them. Let me use a transform. Set this as the same name because I will accumulate in this itself. So what you can do here is basically just add vals dot var of the records. The records is an array and inside it will have an object. The object will come as a payload. We'll just try appending this. Okay. It's already initialized the records. So let's check this. Let me use on error continue because you want to continue even if one error. 1 second. What's happening? Okay. So let's give multiple records in this case because I don't think so. 2 records will be enough. Let's create more records. Create. What I will do is I will create 2 records which will have an error and one will be a success one. So first record will throw an error and the third record will throw an error 12, 14. Let me give it this as 16. Okay. Two records will give an error. So deployed. Yeah. Let's check. Okay, array of objects. Okay, I've initialized an array which is empty. Here, first record throws an error. Let me check my error record. If you see, the first object which gives an error has been accumulated. Comes here, second record, there was no error. In the third record, I have an error. Let me print it out. So we are going to print it out. This logger will definitely accumulate all the error records, and you can have it in a variable if you want to send out a mail or if you want to write it to a file, whatever next operations you need to perform. Basically, two of the records should be there. One is a success. Yeah, let me show you my logger. If you see, two error records are there. One of them was a success. 14 employee ID. It's not there in my log. So this is the way you can accumulate it. Is that clear? Abhishek, any more questions?
Now,
Okay.
we can move forward.
Okay. Let's go for multiprocessing in case of a scatter gather. So when to use scatter gather? Basically, when we have multicasting scenario, suppose if I want to perform two operations at a time. Now, if I give my in case, what is the scenario? If I want to check the number validation as well as the string validation, employee ID validation as well as the employee name validation, then this I can definitely perform using scatter gather. So let's first see how is the scatter gather error scenario works. What I'm doing here, I have employee name set employee ID. I want to check them parallelly. I don't want to do one after another. I want to increase my execution time. So what I am doing here, checking if the variable name I have stored it where's.employee where's.employee ID. It should be a number and this should not be a blank string. So this will be basically a parallel execution for checking all my validations. So let's see how scatter gather throws an error. I have a flow level error handler. On error continue. I'm just printing out the payload. What is the error? Error message and then payload. Let's see how this basically gives out. And then we can discuss. So scatter gather, whenever there is an error, we go back to the slide. Parallelly processing, whenever there is one or more process according to the discussion, like if there are one or more processes, then you can definitely go back to this. We can use various features. We have two approaches. Basically, wrap it in a try-catch block, or you can use component level itself for that components which in the scatter gather. So what happens? Scatter gather, there is anything always throws an on error composite router error. Let's debug and check the scatter gather error scenario. Okay, I didn't have a good point here. What happens? You see my input employee ID is right, but I've given employee name as a blank string. Comes out error is been. So if you see here, error has been created. Error object. So what is the error type here? Mule composite routing error. So even if there is any error in one of the parallel processing, right? There are two threads that are running asynchronously. Even on one of the process or one of the flow in this scatter gather, there is an error, it will throw out the mule composite routing. It won't stop the execution. The execution of others will be successfully completed, or it will give you a success and an error. But if there is an error in one of the component, it will throw out the mule composite routing. And the output, if we see how it gives me, this is the best thing about scatter gather. You can see how many records are filled, and in this how many records are success. So under failures you can see which record has failed. So the string was blank, this shows me failure. And other, on the other route what happened, it shows me on the other route there was success response because it was a number. So it shows on what route what happened. This is good about scatter gather. If there is a failure on one route, it will give you, because I have two routes, I have two parallel processing, 0 and 1. So it failed on 0 but it successfully completed on 1, so it comes under the results. So this is how the error object looks like in a scatter gather if you want to print it out. So you can print it out just giving error dot error message payload of 0 will basically be failure, and payload of 1, it will be my results. If you want to do something, if you have a scenario where you want to just fetch the successful results, you can just do payload of 1 processing of these results. Or if you want to set it out or print it out or do anything with the failures, then you can do payload of 0, and on the error handling process you can handle whatever scenarios you want to do whenever there is an error thrown out on one of the root of the scatter gather. So basically we need 2 points to remember. If I will say, if there is an error on one of the root, the processing will be completed but it will throw out a composite router error. If you want to see how what are the records that have successfully been completed, then you can definitely print error message and payload. In the error message payload, it will give you what are the success, what are the failures in this, and you can process it according to your need. So if we go back, how we'll handle the scenarios when such errors occur. Okay, which is scatter gather. If you go back, this is the is true. This is the case scenario one, how you can handle errors on the scatter gather part itself. 1 second.
Guys, this is a good point to remember for scatter gather. So over this also. Yeah, Nikhil.
Yeah. So first scenario, how you can handle this error. Suppose if there is any error on first of root or second root. In this case, suppose I assume this is error on my first root. What you can do, if you don't want to handle it on the component level, you can use on error continue at the flow level. Just log out as we have done here, the same scenario. On error continue, I have given you the payload, I have given you the records, what are the failure records, whatever are the success record. If you want to do any processing with the failure, if you want to do any processing with the success, you can go ahead and do it. This is the one scenario how you can handle the error in the scatter gather. If I don't have, suppose let me give a scenario, if I don't have a flow level error handler, I don't have anything. I'm not handling the error on the scatter gather level. Whatever is the error should be propagated to the default level error handler. I don't have a flow, I don't have a component, neither I have a global. So it's the MuleSoft default level error handler. What you have, just it gives you employee name cannot be empty, error description, and you don't get anything. It's just 500 server error. So if you want to get the results, you can use a payload there and set it out. Okay. The first scenario that we have just seen. Now let's see the second scenario. I think I have replaced the file names. Okay. On error continue. The first scenario where we printed out the success and the failure records. Okay. The second scenario is handling the errors at the component level itself. So if there is my requirement, I don't want to go back to my flow level error handler. I want to just handle whatever are the errors at my component level itself. I can use on error continue here. It won't give me an composite router error. It will give me 200, and the further components will also be executed in this case. If you see in the previous case, there was no execution of further components because this whole scatter gather had given me composite router error, went to the flow level, and just it handled it on that. There were no execution of the further components in the flow. Okay, so what we have done here, I have set it up blank string into a try catch block. I'm using on error continue, logging the error record is number, logging the error record here. Just put a transform message for the payload. So if there is any error, it won't give me, or it won't throw out an on error composite router and my further components in the scatter gather. If I transform, if I have any other in this scenario, in your case, those will be executed. So let's check this. This is the first approach. Okay, what I have in the body here, single record, doing the validation for employee ID, employee name will give me an error. If you see here, employee name has given me an error, it should not be blank, but I have an on error continue in place. If you see, the error has been logged, record has been locked out. Okay, the record has been logged out and the further components will be executed. Okay, if you see 200, okay, and this is my payload. It shows which are the records because both are the success records in this scenario. We don't have any failure because both of them are using on error continue here. So this is the second approach that we will be using try catch block, the component level error handling. First scenario we saw printing it out failure and success record, and the second scenario using on error continue on the component level itself. Okay, before we go to the batch, any questions on scatter gather?
No, not till now. Questions?
Okay, now we'll see how do we handle errors in the batch level. What is batch? That's basically multi-threading approach that we have in batch. You see, this is my batch. So if you have multiple records, if you want to get records from a Salesforce insert into a database, so multi-threading concept is where it comes into picture. If you have thousands or millions of records, then we definitely have to use batch. For each is not definitely a good way. Parallel for each, not that much effective. Batch, one of the most effective. You can see if you're processing multiple records at a time. Happen inside a batch if there is an error. Let me first points to remember when we do batch level error handling. So if there is any error occurred inside the job, it will never propagate to the main flow. But if error occurs in the source section, then only it will propagate to the main flow. So this whole is my batch. If there is any error inside this batch, in the batch step or anything, it won't ever go to my main flow error level handler. We have to handle the errors at the batch level itself because it's asynchronous. The threads are different for each record. If there is error in listener, of course, then it will go to the flow level error handler. This is the point to remember, and this will see definitely next when we go. So let's see what I'm checking. It's a blank string. My batch level handler. Batch also definitely will take an array of records. Key, my first approach. I have an array of records, two records. Let me create one error in the first record itself. I will give this an empty. I don't have a breakpoint set. Let's set a breakpoint. Okay. If you see validation blank string in the first record, second record success. I have a batch step failure record already propagated, so it will handle the error level itself. Okay, complete. Let me comment this for now. That will be much better. Job batch. Step well, no batch on complete. This is my success records on complete. This is my simple batch of execution. Okay. You see, first error record goes to incomplete. We have nothing like it. Just giving me 200. Okay. If you see in the console, check the console what it gives. Finished instance for the records, total records processed 2, successful record 1, and failed record 1. So how do we handle these failed records? Suppose there's multiple execution going and we want to do something with the failed record. So one scenario, what I had the approach is we can create a new batch step which will just handle all my failed records. Okay. This is my first batch step where I'm doing the processing for each record. If there is an error thrown out from this is my next batch step, which will, if you check here, except policy, I have set it to only failures, only failed records. I will do the processing. Suppose there is a scenario if I'm inserting some records into database, okay, from Salesforce, and these records have failed in my batch step 1. So in the second step, what I want to do with those failed records, I basically want to send out an mail saying that these records have failed. So whatever record, suppose out of records have failed in the batch step 1 while processing or inserting into a database, I can do a error handling for those in my batch step failure records, because this will only accept only failures. And if you check the policy for this, it's accepting all records and you can just do the operation like inserting. But if there is failed records from batch step 1, I'm accepting these records. I'm just logging it for now in this
Nikhil,
repository.
you
Yeah,
can show like what all options we get in accept policies, and then out of that you used only failure for this one. Can you drag? Can you
yeah,
drop
yeah,
down
yeah,
these
yeah,
policies?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
So
these
all
all are
records
the
basically, yeah. No failures by default. If you give no failures, then it won't accept it, and only failures. So this is my batch step when I'm telling it should only accept the failure records and process it. I'm not going to do anything with the success records because they are already inserted. So this is my error handling for the failure records, one of the approach that we can use. And one thing that you need to set here, and go back to the slide, if you see here, three things that we have: max failed records, what it stands for, you can see here, max failed records. If I set it to 0, stop processing when a failed record is found. Okay. If I set to 0, batch step 1 will be executed. It won't go to batch step. It will just stop the processing if there is any failed record found. So if I set it to 1, it will continue processing regardless of the number of failed records. And if I set the max size as an integer, continue processing until maximum failed records have reached. So if you see here, my block size is 100. So I've set the max failed records to 100. Even if out of 100, 10 records are failing, then it will go back to my failure record step. There might be a probability of 100 records also failing. So I've set it to 100 itself. So you have to set this component also when you are trying to use batch. 3 points to remember: setting it to 0, stop the processing, continue processing regardless. And if you are setting to an integer, I've set it to 100. If there is any failed records, it will continue the processing. It won't go to the directly on complete state. It will go to my next batch step basically. The next batch step will just handle the failure records. Let's see how it works. Okay, is this window gone? Yeah. Okay. Record has failed. Second record success. If you see, failed record has come here. I'll check the console. I have logged the failed record because this one was failing. This was an empty string. It just logged it out and then came out. If you see here, what is the success? One successful, one failed record. What I have done is I have put my failed records in next batch step and I've just logged it out. You guys can do anything like and send out a mail of those failed records. So whatever action you want to do, you can do it in this next batch step. One of the way how you can handle the records in the batch. Another way, or you can say the second approach, like what we did in for each or scatter gather, we can wrap that component of database component or validation component inside a try catch block. Even there is an error, you can continue. You can log the records here. If there is an error, whatever processing you want to do, I've just logged it. You can have it. You can send out a mail or you can just accumulate it or whatever you want to do. Just validating. Simply put a try catch block. This is only my batch step. I just have one batch step. I'll show you a second approach. Two ways. Add a batch step with accept policy as only failures that we did to know all those who have failed records. And we have a add try catch activity in batch steps. So we have seen this. Okay. So this was my accept failure. Failures. I've set it here accept failures and accept policy has been set to only failures. So which accepts only the failure record. And the next we need to see is wrapping that in a try catch block or using a try catch block in a batch step. Okay. Let's check this. An array of records. Let's record. Let's put a breakpoint. Yeah. First record gives an error. On error, continue. I have the record. You can process the record. I'm just logging the error record here. Second, successful scenario comes out on phase complete. Okay, so if you check here, because I was using on error continue, so it didn't throw as a failed record. It gives 200 OK, as we know. So it gives a successful record. But if you want to do any processing failed records, you can definitely do it inside on error continue. Instead of login, you can send out mails, or if you want to do any reattempt scenario for that. But in this case, what it will show us as 200 OK for all the records. Any questions, Abhishek, for taking this last topic?
No, no questions here.
Okay. Just see how we can handle, if we can say error handling on a data view level itself. So we have different functions like fail, fail if, or else if. So we'll see a demo of fail that we have. Okay. Basic listener. Put payload success, start of the flow, and what I'm doing here is basically we have a fail function which will similarly like raise error. If you can say, it will create an error. Suppose my employee name is blank, like we did raise error, it will fail function under runtime library, you can say, and then it will give me out an error, employee name cannot be empty, else I will just give my input payload. As how you can handle some validation checks if you want to perform. If you don't want to process the flow ahead, if this condition fails itself, you can do it at data view level itself. Just logging it, payload. Simple scenario like validation checks. Okay. It works. What is my variable? Input payload. Employee name is empty. She'll throw an error. You see, employee name cannot be empty. Doesn't go to the next processor. You can throw it, and you can definitely improve your error handling scenario. You can have a flow level error handler here. Set whatever payload you want. Definitely, you can throw back the exceptions as it is. So we can handle it as a flow level, or also we can handle it at a try catch level itself. Just have you to do some initial checks, or you can say some conditional checks for any component. There are different functions which you can do in runtime. I will fail if, try, else, or else try. Okay, any questions, Vishek? I think that's it.
Okay, that was amazing, Nikhil. And just people are requesting, like, do we have any Git link for this one where you can share this code to the attendees? Do you have something like that?
No, let me upload it to my GitHub. Probably
Okay.
we can share it inside the. We can update the document, probably the PPT, and give them the link.
Sure. Okay. So I am sharing my LinkedIn profile with you. You can connect with me. So once Nikhil share that, Nikhil, you can also share your LinkedIn profile if you want. So once you share it over Git along with your Postman collection, then we can share to whoever want this reference.
Yeah, sure.
And I have enabled presenter mode for everyone. So if you have any question, you can ask. Next, we'll play trivia. But before that, I have 2 points, Nikhil. So can you go to any one of your like Anypoint Studio flow?
Yeah.
So can you go to the global one where you have global error handling? Yeah. So one point I want to say is regarding the sequence. So like error handling follows nested if else. Okay. So now suppose you have multiple error type along with your any. Like any is one your error type, and then like you have another on error propagate for HTTP not found or then HTTP connectivity. So make sure that any should always be the last, because whenever a error occurs, it will check the first condition. Now suppose you are getting an error for HTTP. So if the first type is HTTP not found, it will try to match with that. It doesn't satisfy, then it will go to the next. The next one is HTTP connectivity. So it will go to that error handling and it will give you the error. But if you keep the any at the first and then you keep HTTP not found or HTTP connectivity, then any is going to satisfy all the errors. So whatever error is coming, it will go to any and it will satisfy that. It will never come to HTTP not found or HTTP connectivity. So make sure any should always be the last. Second one is like in the connector itself, like maybe it HTTP requester or DB connector or Salesforce, we get a option for mapping. Nikhil, can you show any one of that connector, like HTTP requester? Can you show?
Yeah. Okay.
Or you can just
Edit
drag,
for the.
drag. You can
No, I
drag
had
from the
it.
tab.
I had it. I think I had it here. I understand where you're trying to say.
Yeah, error mapping. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in this, like what it allows, now suppose in
System.
this, you want to map any of the error to any custom type what you have created. Now suppose as that request, you select that and at down you want to have your own custom error type, say maybe app or yeah, custom unauthorized. So even though you have a HTTP bad request error propagate in your error handling, but when you map it, so whenever you are going to get a HTTP bad request from your connector, it's always going to be thrown to customer unauthorized. Okay, so it is mapping directly in connector level. Okay, so these 2 points I just want to highlight in this
Yeah, right. So this, I think, error mapping part. If you want to
error
map,
mapping.
yeah, error mapping to your custom domain, like we do in the raise error, you can do this thing itself. Suppose if there is an flow between experience or system API. So from system API, you want to always don't want to throw bad request. You want to throw something like when there is a bad request, the payload should. You want to give a custom error saying that the payload is not appropriate or some keys are not appropriate. Then you can definitely create your own one and map it to it.
So anyone have any question? So they can either chat or I've made presenter. You can also like unmute and you can ask.